Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Jesse Jackson III. I'm the best-selling author and facilitator of the Don't Kick 'Em Out book and training series. Really proud and happy to be discussing with you here our Closing the Trauma Gap, our book and training series. And in this particular session, we're going to be talking about how to appropriately manage the trauma of grief and loss on a school campus as we go into the holiday season, even in a period of history where we're dealing with major world issues with a pandemic. This particular season of managing grief issues on a school campus is something that all of our faculty needs to be aware of how to do. COVID is a really unique piece because what it does is it creates distance. What we understand about trauma is that it is very vital to have human interaction to help people through rough and difficult times. In this training session, we're going to deal with 4 fundamentals. And number 1 is how to identify grief and loss trauma. The second thing is how to be aware of your own trauma. A lot of people really struggle with dealing with grief because of their own. So they can't really help anybody else. And they typically say things that really don't help the person who's grieving. What does grief and loss look like in a classroom? How do you emotionally prepare yourself for managing grief and loss at work? The top challenges of the next 2 years are really, really unique. And understanding how to help people deal with loss and issues that they personally manage is something that's very critical. The top challenges I see is, once again, the ongoing safe COVID-19 school reentry process, managing the issue of civil unrest and race, trauma management. That's what we're doing today. Election residuals. This is going to be going on for quite some time. Student attendance, student behavior, distance learning, and learning loss. But today we talk about the significance of trauma management and how that really looks for staff. What trauma is, by definition, is deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And this is something, the thing I find most disturbing about it is so many people have become accustomed to have made trauma their norm. They've had so much distress, so many disturbing experiences, they have made trauma their norm. While there are significant issues on the trauma list, the thing that I believe is most critical is for us to understand that when you're helping folks to deal and manage their trauma, the thing that becomes critical is the need for healthy human interaction and validation. So it's how you make people feel who are going through things, who are experiencing loss. They need human interaction. So one of the worst and most dangerous things we can do is to isolate. When we talk about our trauma list, today we're really focusing on the death of loved ones, right? And so while there's multiple things on our trauma list, I want us to focus today on exactly what the trauma of losing a loved one looks like, right? This is real for our students. This is also real for our teachers. There are teachers and faculties all over the country that have experienced deaths of COVID in their own personal life. And it may be COVID, but it might just be the natural deaths of their parents and things of that nature. And even looking at the post-COVID trauma list, it's the death of loved ones. We have lost a lot of people. I've seen over 200 deaths of COVID in faculties that I've experienced over the last 3 years, meaning recently the deaths. But I know these people over the course of 3 years, and it's over 200. So it's just very real, right? So the thing that I want us to kind of highlight is, what are some of the responses that people have that experience loss? Some negative responses are they get angry towards other people. They actually show anger, or they isolate. They're hypersensitive to perceived threats. They also like to connect with other broken people. So a lot of times we see destructive behavior emerge from these type of things. And I want us to be aware of what it looks like so we can start not responding to it, but proactively getting in front of it. There's typically 3 specific types of help. You know, when you start looking at ways to help people deal with their issues, typically we say, hey, you need to go to therapy, you need to talk to somebody. So it's classical sit-down therapy, right? The thing about classical sit-down therapy is that there's very limited progress. And what it tends to do is that as you stay in therapy, it tends to re-traumatize the patient on a week-to-week or basis. Okay, that's why some people have been in therapy for years. What happens in those therapy sessions is they get re-traumatized every visit. That absolutely doesn't make any sense. And that's something we need to be aware of, right? And there's a dependency that grows from dealing with the therapist over that time, because now you're dependent to talk to the therapist to work through your issues. Self-help books and videos. This is something that can be very effective if you get a hold of the right reading material, look at the right videos. It can be very empowering and help you through rough patches. And then there's what I call instructional therapy, in which the therapist is just teaching you and showing you how to overcome your problems. I like to say this is the least used but most effective. We need a therapist to be a teacher. A lot of people need somebody to listen to them, but after you have had a soundboard, you need to know what to do. A lot of people use therapy as a listening re-traumatization process, when we need to gain from therapy insight, knowledge, and understanding. So instructional therapy is the thing that I believe really gives us an advantage, because we have to learn how to manage our traumas. And we a lot of times need our therapist to become a teacher and a guide in what to do, strategies on how to overcome things, not to have coping skills. Coping skills is a temporary delay from the inevitable. We need to know how to overcome things. And the one thing that we have never consistently learned about trauma is trauma has to be managed. A lot of people think that time could heal a wound. Time does not heal wounds. Time heals cuts. And so this means a trauma can internally live inside you forever and come up during sensitive periods of your life, such as holiday season. That's why we're having this discussion, because we've got to learn how to support people and know how to talk to people and give them what they need during sensitive periods, just like holiday season, just like COVID season. It's how you are conveying certain messages. So when we talk about, things that our students really need from us, I am absolutely convinced that the kids will not allow us in their life. They won't receive from us. They won't allow us to teach them and coach them if they're not absolutely convinced that we genuinely like them, right? If they're not convinced that we respect them as people. We respect their issues. And then they won't listen or let us in if they are not absolutely convinced that we believe that they can overcome their current life circumstance. A lot of our kids are coming to us in dire straits, bad situations. They need people that believe in them, that can give them hope, give them a blueprint to get out of a tough situation. When you've lost somebody who you love, typically you can be very disparaged of hope, deprived of hope. You feel down. And so you need someone to give you hope, not inspiration, hope. Well, hope is inspiration, but not motivation. And so the thing that I believe that is so critical that we need to understand, we need to ask ourselves some questions. When we look at the relationships, we're asking people to build relationships, but many people just absolutely don't understand the details of that. So it's imperative that you ask these critical questions. And they are, how does the student view you? Who are you in their eyes? Do they see you as a support, or do they see you as somebody who does not contribute, or they can't go to or share a critical thought? 2, are you accessible? Are you available? COVID has separated us. It's forced some of us to virtual learning at home. We're disconnected from our kids, and even on the campus, we're not able to physically engage with our kids as we have in the past. So are you accessible, even in COVID? Are you trustworthy? If I tell you something, can you be trusted to be a person who I can believe, I can trust with sensitive information about my life? And 4, understanding that people who are hurt don't typically trust or engage. So the matter of becoming trustworthy is something that cannot be underestimated. When someone shares a trauma with you, they are basically giving you a vote of confidence and trust that they believe in you. That is not anything that we should take lightly. What I like to do is this process called our healing school. It's a fundamental process which helps or allows an educator to understand some fundamentals about helping co-workers and students to manage grief and loss. It's professional ways to do things. It's not you becoming a therapist, but it's helping you to understand how do you actually help people who have experienced grief and loss. When we talk healing, this is a critical component that we believe is valuable in our understanding. When we look to understand healing, the way that it's become very clear to me is to understand that all human beings have a three-part system, and that is an internal spirit, a mind, and a body. It becomes imperative now that we learn how to treat all three parts of the human being. You have to learn how to treat and heal your mind. You have to learn how to treat and heal the spirit. You have to learn how to heal and treat and heal your body. Most of the time with medicine typically tends to treat the body. So the medicine can work for you, and likely typically does, but that's only 33% of the equation. So if your body is the only thing that's getting treated, you're leaving 66% of the human reality out of the equation. And this is what happens. You can see a lot of people, man, they work on their body, but they don't work on their mind. They don't work on their inner man. You have a lot of other folks who might work on their spirit, very spiritual. They have strong faith and they do things like that, but they don't build their mind up. They're not readers. They don't guard their mind. They let their body go. So the key with healing the healing formula is to learn how to feed the human spirit, renew the human mind, and the body, the physical body, follows next. I often like to say a lot of people who are broken, they talk broken. I spent a lot of time in hospitals working and also with my own family. And one of the things that I noticed is that there is a very common dialogue among sick patients. They sound sick. What am I saying? The things that are coming out of their mouth, the things that are coming out of their head are some very sick thoughts. I want to show you some things that support that gives us a blueprint on how to actually help ourselves. So one of the things I like to first start us off with is the ability to manage our own traumas. Now look at what's on my list when I start talking about people who are not well helping themselves. The first principle is the ability to be able to acknowledge that there's a problem. There's a lot of people who are corrupt in their mind who feel that it is not okay to acknowledge that something's wrong. So they're in denial, right? When you're talking to them, they could be sitting in the hospital and they'll be denouncing and saying, well, hey, nothing's going on and I shouldn't be here. You can hear it from them. They won't acknowledge reality. You have to acknowledge you have a problem first. Number two, you have to be responsible for the problems you are responsible for. If you didn't do it, why are you carrying the burden? A lot of us are burdened with other folks' issues, and that burden really actually has a physical impact on your body. A lot of people are guilty about death. They have a loved one who leaves, a parent or sibling, and they bore guilt. This is something that you can't afford to do. It just absolutely doesn't work, and it's very destructive. You need to be responsible for what you're responsible for. And if you didn't do it, you should not be bearing guilt. And the third is get some help. It is not okay to suffer in silence. This makes absolutely no sense. When you're hurting, when you have lost somebody and you're going through these times, you have to understand that you need help. It's okay. Get some help. That's a supportive coworker, a supportive family member, maybe even therapy, but you have to get some help. And here's the thing I believe that's most important. You have to monitor how you talk. People who are going through grief season really need to pay attention to the things they're saying. How do I know this? I myself, in my own personal life, I've had the misfortune of losing 11 family members to cancer. Both of my parents are deceased. My two sisters are deceased. So I've seen some things. And I've had the misfortune of being around a lot of sick people and being around the hospital for a lot of time in my life. And I have carried some things away. I've understand and been able to understand that there is a dialogue and there's a very consistent pattern of speech that I've seen over the course of time that I believe that can be very helpful for all of us to learn how to be aware of. So when I ask the question, how do you help others to manage their grief and loss of a loved one? The most important thing that I could say without equivocation is the right, well-placed words. If you are a person who knows someone who's dealing with grief and loss, who deals with holiday issues, grief and loss, the best thing you can do as a coworker and a colleague is to learn how to use the right and well-placed words. Let's go to work. What are the real power of words? The real power of words are very simple. Words can cheer people up or break their spirit. That's the power of words. You can't afford to have ill-placed words. You can't afford to just recklessly speak. Words have power. They can build or break a spirit. Words form destinies. Words can wage war or make peace. Healing and pain are in the power of your words, the things we say. We have to understand that we only say what's in our heart. So when people go on to rants, when people say things out of anger and emotion, those are things that were in their heart. So you don't get to apologize after you've said it. It's something very important to understand. What we see is a lot of folks who are going through grief and loss often like to burn bridges. They say things that are very destructive and inappropriate. And what they do is they ruin relationships forever. This is absolutely something we can't afford to do. 6, words create futures. And the thing that's most important, you got to understand you're going to have what you say. I have heard people pronounce their own death. I have heard people consistently confess and use their language to say, I am sick, I am hurting, I'm in pain, versus using their language to say, I'm getting better, I feel better, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to make it. Words have a great influence on our ability to be well. When someone's dealing with grief and loss, it becomes imperative that we learn how to speak and use the right place words towards someone managing grief and loss. What I want to do is to give us a list of things to say and not to say. Number 1, I'm sorry to hear that. When someone is going through grief and loss or holiday issues, when they tell you about it, one of the worst things you can possibly say is, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, my question to you is, why would you be sorry to hear that? Typically, when I say that to someone who made that statement, they will go on to explain how they really feel. It hurts me that you're going through this. Well, guess what? That sounds much better than I'm sorry to hear that. You didn't do it, so you being sorry attempts to hijack the issue away from the grieving person. You're sorry for things that you do. You apologize for things that you contributed to. You didn't contribute to this person's death. So I'm sorry to hear that can make the person feel in a very sensitive way. It hijacks the grief from the person, and that's not what you want to do. How are you doing? Well, how would you be doing if you were dealing with the loss of your loved one? Bad question. How do you feel? Horrible question. How do you think I feel? Horrible question. Is there anything I could do for you? Of course it is. Bring back my deceased loved one. You can't ask people questions that you absolutely can't answer or deliver on. It makes absolutely no sense. It's going to get better. You can't prove that. A lot of people will make very religious-oriented statements and say they're in a better place or God took them and things of that nature. I believe it's very imperative that folks understand that that doesn't help the grieving person. Those type of statements can be very confusing and can cause offense and distraction to the person. God has a plan. So it was God's plan to kill my relative? I think we need to be cautious with these things because they don't resonate with the person. Now, my question to you, is our goal to help the person, or is our goal just to say things to make ourselves feel better? The goal always should be to provide supportive dialogue so that the person who's experiencing the grief is comforted and supported during the transition. These statements absolutely don't do that. There's many more I could say, but I believe you get my drift. The point of language is to encourage, not to discourage or to trigger the person to feel worse. What are things we can say? How are you coming along? What that denotes is that you, the speaker, understands that healing from grief is a process. When the person hears that, what they understand is that you understand how they're feeling. 2, how are you managing? That gives them a chance to reflect. That tells them that you understand that they're getting through it. I love you, if appropriate, if for the relationship. That is something that encourages and support. And the key word is if appropriate for the relationship. Typically for coworkers, it's not. 4, can I take care of a specific item for you? So now notice, I didn't ask them, is there anything I can do for you? No, I see a need, and can I take care of it for you? That helps the person, right? You see what needs to be done. You say, hey, can I do that for you? That helps them. Give a hug if possible or if appropriate. Hugs can be very encouraging and get a person through a very rough patch. We're going through COVID-19 right now, and no touching is a major policy. Once again, if possible and if appropriate, the hug can be extremely encouraging. Say nothing. If you don't know what to say nothing. If you don't know what to say nothing. Okay? If you don't know what to say and you don't have anything to say at that time, it's okay not to talk. Right? Say nothing. Right? So, a wise man once said nothing. If you don't have anything, don't say anything. People say, ooh, Jackson, that's hard. It makes you feel uncomfortable. But guess what? It's okay for you to feel uncomfortable because you're not the person dealing with the grief. Why would you want to make the person with the grief feel worse or uncomfortable just because you feel the need to say something? Say nothing. If you don't have anything, don't say anything. And last, my comfort for your loss. This is something that they particularly say, in Africa. It's where a person is saying, my comfort, the comfort that I have, is for your loss. I'm extending it to you. So I'm a comforter. I will comfort you in your loss. It is extending your love to a person. That's a very thoughtful statement. And you can make it through this. You can make it through this. You can make it through this. Now notice this. Notice what you said. You can make it. See, that's empowering. You can make it through this. It's going to get better. You can't say that because you don't know that. But what you can say, you can do it. See, that's encouragement. You can make it through this now. It's tough, but you can make it through it. So the thing is that's so important when you look at these words. The things to say has to be catered to helping the person in front of me. The most important thing we could do, the thing that's so important, we got to understand that in time of grief and loss for the individual, it becomes so important that we know how to support them. And a lot of times that is with the right, well-placed words. And a lot of folks just don't know what to say and end up saying things that make it worse. Always remember the key and critical, the foundations. If you don't have anything to say, your presence and just your support in your presence is very important and helpful. The key is we are focused on helping the person who's grieving. whether that's a holiday time, whether that's dealing with COVID deaths within our staff or in helping folks dealing with family, just being a supportive person by asking the right questions. How are you coming along? How are you managing? You know, I love you if it's appropriate. Can I take care of this right here? Can I do this for you? Can I help you right now with this? Knowing specifically what you're asking to help them with, not saying, can I do anything for you? Because that leaves the person to think and it actually triggers them toward pain. I know that personally. Give them a hug if possible or if appropriate. If you have nothing, say nothing. Okay. You can make it through this. You can make it through this. You can make it through this. My comfort is here for your loss. We are here to support you. These are key and critical things that we can say to our coworkers that help our coworkers to make it through rough times. These are things we can say for our students that help them through rough times. We don't know what a lot of our kids are going through. We don't know specifically what it is, but what we do know is for many of them, it is very challenging. It's very tough. And to deal with what all we have to deal with that COVID has brought us, on top of all of the traumas we already had, an adult understanding how to manage in times of grief and loss and supporting other people, having the right understanding of how I talk, what I say, and how it impacts people can be so critical to helping folks to heal and be well in their life, particularly when managing grief and loss. I'm Dr. Jesse Jackson III. I hope this has been very valuable to you and has given you a degree of a blueprint on how to deal with very challenging, sensitive, and sometimes difficult issues. The key is with this to never forget, we are here to help and support the person. So the key is to always ask yourself, did what I say help the person? And if it didn't, always remember there's no penalty for silence. If you don't know what to say, never forget, it's okay to say nothing. Dr. Jackson, thank you so much for joining me for training. I'll see you next time. Be well.